These are the technique tips for Northern Ireland question 9, the how useful question. You can see that this is worth 5 marks. There are so many things that are important for you to be able to achieve 5 marks in your answer. You must quote from the source. That shows that you have used the source and the content of the source in your answer. You must also make judgments based on the author and the date. You're judging as to whether or not the content, the author and the date makes this source useful to an historian, in this case trying to find out all about the reactions to Terence O'Neill's policies and actions in the 1960s. But you must also explain your judgment. Why is it that the content makes it useful? Why is it that the author or the date makes it useful? Or why, indeed, have you considered these things to offer limitations to the source that make the source not so useful? Firstly, start with the question. It's all about trying to use the source to find out whether it's useful in reactions to Prime Minister O'Neill's policies and actions. You need to think, what do you know about O'Neill's policies and actions and about the reactions to them? What were Unionist reactions? In this case, many thought or feared that the policies would affect them negatively. What were nationalist reactions? Initially, they were hopeful that it would bring improvement for nationalists, but later they were many of them disappointed as the policies were enacted. What were reactions like outside Northern Ireland? And in this case, that's why this source is useful. It shows us what someone outside of Northern Ireland thought about O'Neill's policies. So let's get to looking at an answer. In this case, we are making a judgment. Source C is useful to an historian studying reactions to O'Neill's policies and actions, and you'll see I have deliberately used the words of the question. It shows how some people reacted, like Jack Lynch. Quote, hope that O'Neill's reforms allow Unionists and Nationalists in the North to have civil rights. And we see that his reaction is one of hope. We also see that the reaction was that they thought O'Neill was sincere. And we see that another reaction identified O'Neill trying to promote understanding and encourage cooperation and good relations. Overall, this reaction is a positive one. So we're using the content of the source to help us judge whether it's useful in trying to find out about reactions. And in that case, it is useful. We can use the author and date to judge usefulness. We can see the author is the Taoiseach. And I want to say, well, so what? Why does his position as Taoiseach make him useful? In this case, he's useful for reflecting many nationalist views. The fact that he's speaking in 1969 is also useful, as we can see reactions after the policies have been implemented and indeed after O'Neill himself has been removed or has resigned. And that helps us to judge reactions. However, this is not entirely useful because we see that it does not outline the Unionist reactions or indeed immediate nationalist reactions. And so we're able to suggest that it doesn't show Unionists felt he had overlooked their needs in housing and employment, and it doesn't show how nationalists thought they were good in theory, but it didn't help completely because a university in Coleraine was less useful to them than perhaps a university in another town. And so we have made a judgment. We have said how it's useful and how it's not. We have made reference to the source by quoting, but we have also suggested that it was limited in what it told us about reactions to the policies and the actions, and we've said what we knew about them that the source didn't. There's a lot packed into this answer, and you need to do that to get your 5 marks. Where it often goes wrong is that people don't quote from the source, or they don't use contextual knowledge to show why the content of the source was not useful. Also, they don't reiterate judgments based on author and date, or they simply describe the author or describe the date, but they don't explain why that makes them judge it useful or not. So, for example, it's not going to get you the marks you want if you just say the source is useful because it's written by the Taoiseach. That's not explaining why the Taoiseach is a useful person to be writing this source. Where we can get benefit, however, is if we can develop it. The source is useful because it's written by the Taoiseach, who will understand and reflect nationalist reactions to the policies. That helps explain the judgment about the author much better.